Hey, how y'all doing today? I'm Tim Glass. Welcome to A Word on the Word. While you're here, go ahead and click the subscribe button and go ahead and hit the notification bell. That way you'll be notified, when we have new content that we put on the channel. Also, leave a comment. Let me know, how you doing. Say hey. Make suggestions for future topics, Bible studies or whatever. And go ahead and share. Share with your family and friends and share with them the good news of Jesus Christ. Now, here's a word on the word. We're in Genesis chapter 3. We're going to be in verses 17 through 19. Yeah. If you know me, you know I can kind of ramble. So we'll see how far we get, and maybe we'll finish the whole thing, right? So in verse 17 of Genesis chapter 3, this is God speaking to Adam. Then to Adam he said, God, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten from the tree about which I commanded you, saying you shall not eat from it, cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall grow for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground, because from it you were taken. For you are dust, and to dust you shall return. All right, right here in verse 17, God, spells it out. Because you have listened to the voice of your wife. Whoa. Don't panic, husbands. God is not saying because we listen to the voice of our wife, we're going to get in all this trouble. If you read it, and of course, I'm not a literary scholar, a Bible scholar, but I think it could have been phrased a little bit better, and maybe it is in some other translations, more of the modern stuff. But if you kind of read, because you've listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten from the tree that I commanded you, saying you should not eat from, it seems like what God is saying is because you listened to the voice of your wife over what I told you. Because God had given him that commandment, and he had shared it with Eve about this tree, and not eating the fruit of it. They had the whole run of the garden. Just don't eat from this tree. And Eve was tempted, and of course we talked about Adam at least being within earshot. It said that she gave to her husband that was with her that he didn't step in. He didn't stand up to the serpent and say, just get out of here, this ain't right. He didn't take Eve aside and say, look, I know this sounds good, I've been standing over here listening to what's going on, and he's got all these, promises and things. God wouldn't, he didn't tell me. He just said, don't eat from the tree, But we need to seek God on this. We need to call on him right now and say, God, help us. God, what's going on here? But he didn't do that. He listened to the voice of his wife over what God had told him directly. And guys and ladies, we're faced with that same dilemma today, whether it's societal pressure, our family structures, just the world, and even within our own minds, we can be so easily double-minded because we don't have the sense of urgency. We don't seek God the way we need to, because we don't make him a priority. I know that that's been true in my life, and it can be true from day to day or week to week, even now, because we find ourselves in such a time crunch, and time is so valuable, and we think we're prioritizing the things that are important. But guys, if we're not prioritizing our time with God, be it through scripture reading, going to worship service, mass, going to prayer groups and Bible studies, all these things that, I need to put that off because I got this going on here, or I'm so tired, or I'm this, I'm that. We can make excuses, and I think if we look around us, we see what excuse making has done to society because of Christian folk not prioritizing our time with God, not growing in the grace and the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ, not following the truth of the Word spoken through the Bible, spoken through the church, spoken through mentors, pastors, close friends who try to lead godly lives. And we excuse all this stuff away. We excuse our time with God away. We excuse the truths of biblical, with a biblical foundation, and excuse sin. We're not taking a stand because, we have this image of God in our own mind. Instead of being created in His image as we are, we start trying to create God in our image and what we think God should be, or our interpretation, or whatever's been handed down from cultural understanding mostly. If you're a serious Bible student, a serious Christian, and you want to get to the truth of the matter, and you start in the Holy Scriptures, then you understand that there is a fine line between God's anger and His judgment and God's love and His mercy. And His love and His mercy are abundant, and He offers us so much time. He extends so much patience to us because He loves us so much. But then there's judgment time. And this is one of the times here that he brings judgment upon the man and the woman and the serpent. But also moving through there, in the second part of verse 17, it says, "Cursed is the ground because of you." Okay. God's anger and His wrath at this disobedience. I mean, He really could have put the hammer down on mankind. First of all, He could have just, wiped us out, started over. But He didn't. I mean, this wasn't a plan B. This is the plan that God had from all eternity. And we sometimes, forget that, overlook that. Or we think that, well, we fell, and so God had to go, okay, well, let me regroup. Well, what are we going to do? God doesn't work that way because He knows everything. He knows, what was going to happen, and how it was going to be resolved. And within that, He gives us this free will to choose to obey Him or choose to not obey Him. And in this case, we see the non-obedience brings about judgment. And this judgment is primarily on nature, on the earth, on the ground. And when that is cursed, it makes it more difficult for us, right? I mean, particularly here in an agricultural society, instead of, just picking the plants, picking the fruit, and having, the all-you-could-eat buffet there, now he's going to have to struggle, toil and be frustrated by the ground, the thorns and the thistles and the weeds and everything that comes in. Well, I mean, that's the metaphor of today's life, right? We were just talking about that when we don't prioritize our time with God and we listen to the outside influences, right? This is judgment still. This is what we end up being like when we disobey God, and we have to, not just go from the curse of our first parents, but we're in a sense cursing ourselves because we're not prioritizing that stuff, and we're really doubling up our judgment, because not only is it natural in the sense that we're going to struggle in relationships and in society and earning a living and doing those things that we need to do to take care of our family, and to get along with our family. But if we're disobeying God in the process, then I've got that double effect, because if I'm disobeying God, then these things are going to be even more difficult. And life's difficult enough, and it's going to be difficult as we move closer and closer to the last days. But it can be the spiritual awakening that we need. It needs to provoke our hearts and our souls to seek God. Listen to Him. Listen to what He says. His word, it says He sends forth His word and it doesn't return to Him void. God has a purpose for what He does. And in this purpose, He sends forth His grace. And it's up to us to accept it. And we can accept it or reject it. He leaves that up to us. But the consequences are still going to be ours to face, in obedience or in disobedience. So, cursed is the ground because of you, and toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall grow, and you shall eat the plants of the field. We talk about by the sweat of your face, you shall eat bread till you return to the ground. Because from it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. And as we're looking at this part of it, I wanted to kind of bring up, because when God created Adam, it said He brought him forth from the ground, and then He breathed into him the breath of life, gave him a soul, and that soul is what really is the image and likeness of God, with the intellect, the reasoning, the intelligence that He gave us to think things through, unlike the animals who are, instinctual. We can think abstractly and think of, work out difficult problems, concepts, and try to understand better the world that's around us and what the meaning of life is. And one of the things that we hit on last week, I believe it was last week, is that when we saw snakes, right? And it kind of reminded us, if we're in that mind frame, of that event so long ago, of the temptation and of the crushing of the head and the bruising of the heel. But since Adam was made from the dust, and when God is cursing the serpent, it says, "On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life." That's in chapter 3, verse 14. And he, he mentions the word dust, from which Adam was created. Satan's going to be eating it, or the serpent's going to be eating the dust. Okay, and we'll want to look at this in the spiritual sense here. And then in the curse of Adam, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Now, he's talking about the act of physical death, in the literal sense. And in the spiritual sense, I think we could really tie that into being created, right? He came from the ground, and God said, you are dust, and to dust you shall return. You will return to the earth. But I thought it was very interesting that that there in verse 14, "On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life." So I think that in the spiritual sense, if we look at this, God is, continually reminding us of this original curse. He's reminding Satan of it, because even when we die, the dust of all the things that he's destroyed or tried to destroy is right in his face, right? It's a constant reminder to Satan that that God's in charge, that God's will is eventually going to be fulfilled, and no matter what he tries to do, God is God, and he's not. And I think that if we look at it in that light, to remember and be humble before God, that our years here on earth are limited. So we do have a responsibility to be, to be urgent in our messaging about the gospel to others and to our families. But we can't sugarcoat this, because there are real consequences for disobedience, and it goes on to today. So if we're going to draw these conclusions to this session and how we apply this to our lives, when we are called to listen to society's promises, promises of our spouses, of our employers, friends, other family members, whatever, are we going to choose that voice? Are we going to choose to listen to that voice over the voice of God? And how, in maintaining our relationship with God, we will help our hearts to be more prepared to be obedient to his word over the disobedience or the temptation that comes along through life. And then to remember the curses and how they can be multiplied in our lives. Not just through the normal curse of the fall and the effect of original sin in our lives, affecting, creation, affecting our relationships with one another and with God, but to also realize that there's the judgment, that we will die one day, we'll return to dust, but then at that same time, God is still judging Satan and putting all this dust in his face and saying, this is what you orchestrated. and you will be paid. You will be judged harshly for what you have done. God, have mercy on us. May we seek him in truth, in spirit, and make him a priority in our lives. Guys, I appreciate your time this week. I know it's valuable to you. I appreciate the prayers for me and my family. I'm praying for you guys, and y'all have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week.